last 40 years. So maybe that's why everybody was reminiscing. I'm not sure if it was planned, but Membeis, that's Membeis Massei. You hit it right on. So what are we gonna do next year? You hit it right on the knob, right on the knob. Okay, what we have on the menu tonight, we're gonna do the following. We're gonna start off with a short introduction from a sikha of this week's parsha in Chelik Yudches, Likutei Sichos, and then we're gonna go into today's topic that you have. Thank you for the photocopies, which is from Likutei Sichos Chelik Yudches. Okay. It's a section from Haftas. It doesn't say any where it's from, so I'm telling you. So Likutei Sichos Chelik Haftas, that's where the actual sikha is from. So we're going to be going through the general theme of the beginning of this week's parsha, which goes to the journeys, the travels that Bnei Yisrael had throughout the 40 years in the desert. And one of the fundamental teachings of the Baal Shem Tov that the Rebbe emphasized a lot in this parsha, and that's the idea of Yiridu L'Tzayich Aliyah. Thank you. That even those journeys and those travels that unfortunately are filled with negativity, are filled with the downfall, they are all part of the journey of the Aliyah. And this concept is one of the most fundamental concepts in Chassidus, but not just as a philosophy, but really as a way of life. And what we're going to go through after we go through the short introduction as it relates to this week's parsha, we're going to go through this sikha, which relates it to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the building and the rebuilding of the future Beis HaMikdash, and how the destruction is all part of the steps to the building of it. It's the sikha is going to go through a number of different aspects in Nigla and Halacha of asking on the destruction, how it was able to take place, why God did it, how He was allowed to do such a thing. And that's how we're going to build our way up in the sikha. So it builds the way up to a forced conclusion that you must say that the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash was already part of the rebuilding. So let's begin. Rashi, in the beginning of this week's parsha, when it begins discussing Elah Massei Bnei Yisrael Sheyatzu Eretz Mitzrayim, so Rashi there says that the pasuk is that the Torah now is going through the history of our journeys throughout the 40 years, and then Rashi concludes with a mashal. Rabbi Tanchuma darash b'drasha. So Rabbi Tanchuma brought the following drasha: Mashal Melech Shaya B'nai Chayla. It's similar to a king his prince, his son, his child was sick. And he had to travel afar in order to heal him. And when they were returning back from their journey, they began counting all the different stops that they made and reminiscing, here we got cold, here you had a headache, here we slept. That's the mashal that Rashi brings. And in the sikha in Chelik Yudches, the Rebbe asks on this mashal, what is exactly its meaning? What's going on in this mashal that Rashi brings? Where did we sleep? Where did we scratch our heads and have a headache? Where did we become cold? So the Rebbe in the sikha, which we're not going to go through, we're just going through a very small intro, explains this corresponds, goes through the whole mashal and explains how it corresponds to different steps of the journey. And we know that it wasn't all a beautiful encounter, the journey out of Mitzrayim. We had a number of very difficult trips. Some of them were filled with rebellion. They were filled with Peronius. They were filled with, you can say, God's wrath came upon the Jewish people. So not all of them were, roses are red, were so beautiful. They're very rosy. Yeah, it says he's ill, and it goes through. Here he slept, which sounds like a good thing. That's referring to how Chayiv, when we encamp by Chayiv to receive the Torah. And when it says that we got a headache, that's referring to Baal Parah, the bizarre Baal Parah, when we fell into it. So, bottom line is that there were various steps in the 42 journeys that were better not to reminisce about. You want to reminisce about good times. Why do you reminisce about bad times? That's really the question. What is the incentive of us going through all the terrible things? Especially there's a halacha about tshuva, ein maskirim about tshuva. As ma'asav harishonim, it's forbidden to mention to a penitent his bad actions, his actions of the past. It's forbidden. So what is the necessity or purpose of going through all these masas? And so this is what the Rebbe explains, that the purpose of this is to really show that all of these, even negative journeys that took place, they're all part of a ladder, of the process of a ladder of being able to go up and finally make it into Eretz Yisrael. It's all part of the healing process. And in the healing process, you have downs, you have ups, you have different wavelengths, but in the end of the day, it's all to reach the same goal. And as the Baal Shem Tov taught us, as is written in Degel Machane Ephraim, sefer of the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, great grandson, that every Jew goes through 42 masais in his lifetime. Every single Jew has 42 different journeys, beginning with birth. That's the first one, so we all know the first one, and we all know the last one. It's the 40 in the middle that we don't exactly know what's considered a journey, but every single Jew has 42 planned stops in his lifetime, and some of them are Yeridus, some of them are Aliyas. But even those Yeridus are all there to help build him to the goal of his soul. I'm just going to read one section inside. Hamasoi shal Yehudim ladu b'midbar ha'amim nigramim al yedei kach shanasham al-Yehudim b'chlal yodim nigramim al makim shel helam behester. Tachlis hayirida inenu rak l'mana te'ela shetitzmach mikach b'midbar ha'amim ela gam l'mana es alus ha'negamas Yehudim and Tzoyisei. When the Jewish people had to go through the desert throughout the 40 years, they ended up refining the desert. They ended up doing a tremendous Avedus Habirudim. The Rebbe explains in this week's Likutei Torah that even though we understand that the 40 years was a punishment, so to say, because we were supposed to make that so in 3 days, and due to the rebellion in Pasha Shlach, we got the decree Kanye Mokum Furaschen. We stayed there for 40 years. Nonetheless, within that, so to say, punishment, the 40 years, there was a tremendous accomplishment that took place by us refining the Midbar. Midbar is a place without any growth, no vegetation, except a few cactuses here and there. The mamish, no growth, nothing. And that represents the ultimate klipa. The ultimate klipa is that it only takes and doesn't give. It takes, and doesn't give. And that was the idea of, in other words, that the midbar that the Jewish people were in represented a very, very tough and intense evil. And through them being through it in 40 years, they ended up refining it. So that was one purpose. That was one tachlis. But furthermore, the tachlis is not just for something external, to fix something external, but also for the neshama itself. Through them having gone through these 40 years, there ended up being an aliyah as well in the neshamas itself. Now, this wasn't felt at the time, it was concealed, but later on, this became felt. We know that the purpose of exile is the elevation. Nonetheless, during the actual exile, a person doesn't feel that he's going through a elevation process. He feels down in the dumps. It ends up that during the journeys of the downs, we really are found in a desolate area, in the middle, in the desert, a place deserted of chayis, of vitality, of happiness. The Rebbe then goes in the next ice and begins explaining how that all this was really all part of the Aliyah, and all Mem-Beis Masais are all part of one ladder. So this is a general hashkafa b'chlam chassidus, as we know. We read the Tzarech Aliyah, and as is explained, that even regarding sins, even a Jew's sinful period of life, which is done by his own freedom of choice, and by then we should, so to say, limit we should limit and say that in a person's freedom of choice sins, we should not say that is in a Yedida L'Tzarech Aliyah, because he chose to do it. In other words, when we say Yedida L'Tzarech Aliyah, I understand when we say regarding things that happen against your will, against your choice. God placed them upon you. So everything that God does is for the best. the things that you chose, right? Things that a person chose of his own will, and that caused him to have this descent. Maybe by there we don't apply this philosophy. The answer is no. Even then we do. Even though how he got there is, of course, his freedom of choice, and he's going to get punished for making bad decisions, but nonetheless, the concept of a descent, that was all in the divine plan of the ladder, as we state. And that falls right into play with the 42 Massais. The 42 Massais included bad journeys, which was of our own doing, that we did it to ourselves. We complained. How many times we complained? When did we not complain? We caused it to ourselves many of the times. So because of this is a proof to the idea that the Yerida Tzarech Aliyah is even, it includes things that we bring upon ourselves. Nonetheless, there's a divine plan outside of that as well. It's interesting to note that the Mekubalim write that in Kriyas HaTorah you're supposed to read all these 42 together. You're not supposed to make a hefzer. Not everyone does this. In Chabad, that's our minhag. So by Sheni Mincha, Sheni Chamishi, and Shabbos, we read for Rishon the entire. It's very super long. That's also Chitas. It depends which chumash you use for Chitas. If you use the non-Chabad chumash that doesn't go from Torah Tmima, you got out short. I mean, you got a shorter Chitas for something. We went through the entire Messiahs. And the reason is because all these 42 is one big package. And that goes back into the idea that it's all part of the same ladder, including even those journeys that aren't so possible. So this is really a change in outlook in life. As I said earlier, it's not just a matter of philosophy that we believe in. And whether it be regarding overcoming sinful periods, overcoming spiritual downfalls, that a person can overlook them and understand that it was what it was, and I'm moving on, and God is with me in my journeys. It says that Hashem, the Father, was with his Son during the 42 journeys. That's the Mashal of Rash. And God escorts the Jew even in his downtimes. And therefore, he shouldn't look back and let that become a setback in his future elevation.
The person has less remorse than?
Huh?
The person less remorse than?
No, he has to have remorse in making bad decisions. But that doesn't mean that he wouldn't have got there anyways, and it doesn't mean that there isn't a divine purpose. The person has to have remorse for making bad decisions. That's 100%. But together with bad decisions, also Hashgacha Pratis. If a person made a decision to take a right, there was a fork in the road, he decided to go to the right when he should have went to the left, and afterwards he realized, I miscalculated, I'm such an idiot, I lost my flight, I lost this. So he has remorse, he feels bad that he did it, but at the same time, Hashgacha Pratis applies. Understand? So it's the same thing also about sin. One doesn't contradict the other. The remorse doesn't have to contradict the truth. But another thing to use this in is bichlal. When something happens in life, we should look at it as a message from God, not just as a message, as the Gemara says, the fashvish b'maisa. That's 100% true. Whenever something negative happens, a Jew is meant to use it in order to do a cheshbon nefesh, to fix something, to repair something. But you can also further use it to see how can this matter itself become enhanced? How can this matter itself become better? In other words, is that the current setback, the current negativity can be something to be used to then have something stronger in the future. As it says regarding a rope. If the rope tears, when we retie it, we have a stronger knot afterwards when we retie the areas than we did before. And it's a philosophy in life of learning how to contemplate the occurrence and see, okay, aside for all the other messages I have to take from this, how can this itself that I am now lacking become better? Just for an example, I'll just throw out an example. If a person's computer broke down, so that's anyone who's dependent on work for a computer understands that my computer, by the way, is healthy. But if a computer, I may have asked you. If a person's computer broke down, it's difficult. He gets, he has a big setback in work. Anyone who's work dependent. However, he should, instead of using it to be upset and not know what to do with himself, he should understand that he can use this setback to now look into something that will make a new computer that will make his life easier. So in other words, look at what happened as a message to enhance what you already had. And that's the Gamzu L'Toiva. That's the message really that God throws us everywhere. And if you focus on this as philosophy of life, you really see it. You really see how so many things happen. It's really. I'll just give an example. I've had for years. My wife knows, a tiny little fan in my office, a tiny little fan. And all of a sudden, one of the big fans in our house started giving us a lot of problems. I had a lot of headaches with it. And then suddenly I thought in my mind, you know what? I should take that into my office and put it in the window. And that's what we did. So we thought in that direction because something happened to the other fan. In other words, when you think in the direction that the purpose of why this is happening, why is God making me deal with this now? So aside from the cheshbon nefesh, also, as we said before, it's all part of the ladder of the aliyah. So you'll be able to utilize things a lot better to your advantage. Let's begin. We're going to go now into the Sikha, how it attaches all of these ideas into the destruction of the temple, and how the destruction is the building. The Yalkut, in the Yalkut Shemaini of Sefer Yirmiyah, with Chilas in the beginning, it states the following cryptic statement. Ola Aryeh, b'mazel Aryeh, v'hichilas Ariel, came along the lion in the constellation of the lion and destroyed the lioness, the Ariel, the place of the lion. Allah says, that continues the Medrash. Allah Aryeh, what does it mean in this strange and cryptic statement? Allah Aryeh zed Nebuchadnezzar. This is going on, of course, the person who destroyed, the king of Babylon who destroyed the first temple. The Chsiv, Allah Aryeh mesabche mazal Aryeh ad gos Yerushalayim b'chodesh hachamish. So the Medrash brings a pasuk from Yirmiyah, which shows and connotates Nebuchadnezzar together with the term Aryeh. It also connotates it with Mazel Aryeh, which is going on the 5th month, which is, of course, the 5th month from Nisan is Menachem. The Hichreves Ariel, what's Ariel? How the Ariel Kiryas Chana David. It's going on. Kiryas Chana David is, again, based on a pasuk in Shaya, and that is Yerushalayim. Al Manashe Sheyavei. So it continues the Yalkut, right? So it started off that came Aryeh the lion in the mazel of the lion, which is Menachemav, and destroyed the temple. For what purpose? Almanas, for the sake of Sheyavei Aryeh, for the sake that the lion will come, the mazel Aryeh, in the same mazel, the Yivna Ariel, and rebuild it. Yavei Aryeh, who is it this time? Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chsiv Bei Aryeh Shag Mila Yireh. Medrash brings another pasuk referring to Hashem, metaphorically. But Hashem is metaphorically referred to as a lion. And he will come and rebuild the temple. Mazel Aryeh v'afachti av masasa, and then I will end up turning around their mourning into joy. Yivna Ariel b'nei Yerushalayim Hashem nitchi yisol yicham. So this is the Medrash. The Medrash sounds very poetic. Lions coming in the month of lions, poetry. Well, in Jewish literature in the medieval ages was filled with poetry. A lot of all the songs that were written in those times, in Yemei Naim, in the 1000s, 1100s, 1200s, were filled with poetry. That was the in thing at that time. Today, it's not so much. They still have college courses in it, I understand, but people aren't so much into it. They do. Yeah. What I think it's called. Huh? No, but back then, people were not.
Yes.
In comparison, people were not into poetry when you compare it to what was around back then. Back then, I would give this whole shir in poetry.
Right.
The whole shir would just be in poetry. And you have a lot of literature that was written in those times that the whole book is written in poetry. And listen, it's hard enough to understand as it is what Rishonim have to say. And I have to break apart the poetry of it to understand it. It makes it very, very difficult. The point is that this, however, this Medrash of the Yalkut is based on the Drashim written much earlier than this period of time. And it's not so usual for a poetic language to be used stam. So the Rebbe points out the following. All matters in Torah, they are exact. Certainly it's not being done just to get an A+ in the poetry class. The Tzarech Lahav. Mahi ha'adgasha b'zeh shaloshan arye mishamish hein b'negeh lachod b'negeh b'adinyin. What is the purpose of this fancy and flowery language? Just say straight up, cut to the chase. Nebuchadnezzar came in the 5th month in order so Hashem can come in the 5th month and rebuild the temple. Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed the temple enough, so Hashem will come and rebuild the temple enough. Say it straight up as it is. It's not only that the investing of all of these terms and these poetic words is questionable, but it's actually offensive because you're referring to God and Nebuchadnezzar as the same lion, right? That the Aryeh came, Allah Aryeh, referring to Nebuchadnezzar, Aryeh, referring to Hashem. So it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense what the Medrash here is trying to hint to in using this language. And the explanation to this is that the Medrash did so very intentionally. And there was a hidden message that the Medrash is trying to give over by using these terminologies. As al yedei zeh, as through these wordings, metaretz hamedrash she'ela klalus b'negeh l'chol mishnah. The Medrash ends up answering a general question, a halachic question, that needs to be asked regarding the destruction of the temple. Halacha psuki. There's a halachic ruling in the Talmud, Rambam, and Shulchanaruch called Bal Tashchis. Kol HaMeshaber Kelim, the Kereya Begadim V'Heres Binyan, Derech Hashchasa V'Lei Tashchis. Whoever destroys things, vessels, utensils, tears garments, and destroys buildings in a way of destruction, transgresses a biblical negative command of Tashchis. This is a mitzvah that is learned from Parshas Kiseitzei when it's discussing surrounding the cities during warfare, and it says, "Do not destroy the fruit, the trees which bear fruit." And from there, it's learned that it's not just trees that bear fruit which have a prohibition, but anything useful to humanity has a prohibition. Any matter, any item that can be made of use to humanity, there's a biblical prohibition to destroy. It's not just a Chassidishe pshat or a environmental friendly idea. It's an issur in the Torah. We tend to think of Bal Tashchis as kids, the way we grew up, is only with food. Don't throw food in. Bal Tashchis is with anything. You to take a pencil and break it in half because you're bored is an issur deraisa Bal Tashchis.
Waste. Nothing more waste.
Again, this is Bal Tashchis applies towards things that still have human service, that they still have human benefit. Disposable plates.
But everything that's throwing.
Yeah, so we can't. So, for example, if I have a working fridge, and if I have a working fridge, and I would like to get, I keep on mentioning the $10,000 Samsung new fridge, right? And so, I want to get rid of my old fridge, but nobody wants it. I can't take a hammer and knock it apart. I can nicely take it outside, say thank you very much, give it a little goodbye, and leave it outside. Someone takes it, they take it, they don't take it, they don't take it. But anything that's still usable by people is forbidden to destroy. And that's due to this Bal Tashchis. And the same thing applies by a building. Furthermore, so you already see where we're going with this. God destroyed a beautiful building. He destroyed the temple. The first temple and the second temple was even more beautiful. God destroyed two very beautiful buildings. And furthermore, there's a second problem, a second halachic issue. Even if somehow we'll explain, maybe God got a heter from the Bezdin to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, it wasn't considered Bal Tashchis. There's another halachic issue present, and that is that it's forbidden for one to damage any parts of the temple. It's forbidden to damage. In other words, in addition to the general environmental prohibition of a person damaging or destroying an item of use to humanity, there's a special and additional prohibition in damaging God's holy place, a shul or a temple. the temple, the Beis Hamikdash. As it states, it says that someone who destroys a stone in the altar or in the heichal or in the ulam, in a way of destruction, he gets lashes. A negative man of the Torah. Certainly one who destroys the whole Beis Hamikdash. The Rambam writes, this is the halacha in Shulchanarukh, that it's forbidden for one to destroy a Beis Hamikdash or a shul or a Beis Medrash. So how is it, and this is the halacha today, a person can just destroy a shul. Even if he wants to build, he can make a lot of money, sell the area, and build a new complex. So what they just announced today, that in New York, one of the oldest conservative synagogues was sold to build a new project, a new building project, and they made a lot of money off of it. It was never shul to begin with, so we don't have to worry. But if it was a real shul, this is a big problem.
I know one case in Chicago where somebody refused to sell the shul and it just fell into disrepair. One case out of hundreds. A lot of times.
B'imkein, we'll continue. Tzarich lahavin, Ari Magid go Yaakov Chutz Mishpat Yisrael. Boch Makayim Kiviyach Mitzvah Shetzivu Lohanis Yisrael. The question is that since we have introduced and prefaced these two halachic issues with destroying the temple, and it states in Tehillim that God fulfills all that which He instructs His people, that He Himself does the mitzvahs that He instructs us. If so, how did God allow and remain complacent when the temple was destroyed? Furthermore, He is the one who ordered its destruction, as it says in the Nevuah with Nebuchadnezzar in Yirmiyah, that Nebuchadnezzar was appointed by God. It calls Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel, the servant of God. He was doing God's will. The Gemara in Perek Hanizaken and Gittin goes through regarding the second temple. Also, that Nero, Caesar, when he was sent to destroy Jerusalem, he refused to do so until he got God's permission. And what was the sign? He shot the arrow in all directions outside Jerusalem, and it all went to Jerusalem, no matter which direction he shot the arrow. So he saw it was a sign from God. But then he asked a few kids, what did you learn? And they said, we basically learned that anyone who starts up with the Jewish people, God's going to get back at them. So he said back to Hashem, very funny joke. You want me to destroy your temple, then you take revenge on me? I'm out of this business. And he went and converted. Nero.
Yeah. The guy in Satan is crazy. They just don't want to around, right? Nero. The question is on the one who said
the question is that how did God? We just explained that God was directly involved in the destruction. So how did Hashem? How could He at the same time say that He keeps the Torah and go ahead and destroy? Yeah. Here the Sikh is focusing specifically on these things. Now, if you say, well, the Jewish people lost the rights for the temple. To have the temple and have the Shekhinah, you have to be on a certain level. And the Jewish people, unfortunately, were sinful in that era. And they lost the rights. So we have a simple solution for God. Hide it. Make it sink into the ground. Just like God did with Moshe's tabernacle. Moshe's Mishkan is still around till this very day in this physical world. Where, don't ask me, but it's around. It's around. It still exists. It's still fresh. It's still there. God could have hidden it, just like we also find Seir Mizu regarding the Mikdash itself. It says that the fences, the gates, they sunk into the ground itself. Migazu Kama Kalim, and so to a number of Kalim of the base of Mikdash were hidden, such as the Yarin and other Kalim. So in order to take it away because they weren't privileged, you don't have to resort to destroying it. So this is the question. Now the Rebbe is going to go into how the two Isurim don't apply, why they don't apply. The Negea is about Tashchis regarding the prohibition of destroying something useful to humanity. One can answer. The pasuk in Eicha says that God quenched His anger on the temple. The mother there explains in Yuma that this means that instead of God quenching His anger, His wrath on the Jewish people themselves, He quenched it on destroying stones and earth, meaning destroying the Beis Hamikdash. So for this reason, it's not really considered Baal Tashchis. Why? Baal Tashchis only applies when a person destroys it for the sake of destruction, just to be destructive. But in order to fix something, you're allowed to destroy. If it's impossible to fix it without destroying this item. For example, I got the new fridge, the new $10,000 fridge, and it's missing a piece. So now I want to take my hammer and break down my old fridge to get the piece out. It's a perfectly working fridge. I'm allowed to do it because it's for the sake of benefiting something else. Any kilkul that's for the sake of benefit is not an isser about Shabbos. We find this also regarding the isser of doing malacha on Shabbos, this idea, in which it states, whoever damages on Shabbos is patur. This means is that malacha, a person only transgresses malacha on Shabbos if it's done for the sake of a benefit. So, for example, if he tears, correct, deraisa, he's only chayiv. He's only chayiv biblically if it's done, if there's some benefit in his actions. So, if he tore a garment on Shabbos, even though generally that's kareya, it's only truthfully biblically considered kareya if he did it on with intent to then resew it properly, resew it better. But just to destroy it for the sake of destruction, then that's not considered an isser. A person is patur from that. Of course, it's Baal Tashchis. This is a different isser. It's not the isser of Shabbos. Not even though, as we just stated, that it has to be that if it's not for a purpose, then a person doesn't transgress on Shabbos. As it states, one who is angry on Shabbos. He's so angry, he decides, what am I going to do? I can't hit my kids on Shabbos. I can't hit anyone on Shabbos. Right? There's an issur of doing judgment on Shabbos. There's no Sanhedrin on Shabbos. There's no Bezdin. There's no judgment, and we don't hit. You can cause a bruise. This is the ISIS. So what am I going to do? So this person's so angry. So he takes a shirt and he rips it in half. It's only the Rabbanon. I'm doing it for destructive purposes. Nonetheless, in truth, it's ruled. When we tear something or destroy something out of his wrath, he's chayiv minatayra for the Isra of Shabbos. Why? Because by doing so, he just fixed his inclination. He just fixed his emotions. It was called a very bad therapeutic method of calming his anger. But it did. It calmed his anger at the moment. No one shouldn't be followed at home. Don't start taking dishes and throwing them on the floor to calm yourself down. That's why some people have punching bags outside. Just whenever they need to, they just let it out on the punching bag. Okay, so the point is that what the Rebbe is explaining here is that we see that even though in general destruction for the sake of damage is considered purposeless, and even on Shabbos you're patur and Baal Tashchis you're chayiv. However, when you're doing it for the sake of soothing your emotions, then on Shabbos it's not considered you did a kilkel. It's not considered you did a destruction. It's considered you did something beneficial because you did something that was emotionally therapeutic. And so too, regarding Hashem. Since the destruction of the temple, as based on the Gemara that we read, states that through destroying the temple, God's wrath and fury calmed down, and he didn't touch the Jewish people, meaning he didn't annihilate them. So this is a great fixture. This is a great tikkun. So this is a great benefit, and therefore it's not considered the Isser of Baltashkas. By the way, regarding Baltashkas, we rule that it is Baltashkas to destroy something out of anger. So, unless it's a known therapy. If there's a known therapy that you got to do this for the sake of soothing or something. But just to, out of anger, it would still be an Isser Baltashkas. But regarding the Eibishter, this is a real tikkun, save the Jewish people, then that's why it avoids Isser Baltashkas. Yisayim is furthermore. Further ends up that by God spilling his wrath on the temple itself, he ended up not spilling it on the Jewish people. So from the perspective of the Jewish people, the destruction was really a great tikkun. And it had to take place. The kilkul, the destruction had to take place for the sake of saving them, and therefore this does not contain an Isser of Baltashkas. So although we've answered the first question of why it's not considered Baltashkas, what about the second question of there's a special Isser which prohibits one to damage a shul, to damage and certainly the temple itself. Now, although in truth, likewise, just like we said by Baltashkas, the Isser only applies when it's done for destructive purposes, but when it's done for some benefit, it's mutter. So you can argue this special Isser of destroying a shul is only there when it's not done for any purpose, but when it's done for some kind of benefit to fix, then it is permitted. The problem is that when do we say it's permissible to destroy a shul? Only for the sake of rebuilding the same shul, only for the sake of renovating the shul. But to destroy one shul in order to fix something else, that's not allowed. The Prat of sagt in Aramah, people in Beis HaKnesset, also this don't Beis HaKnesset, one can Eisam Nas Livnis. The Malbuz and Shulchanaruchharav that it's forbidden to destroy anything in the shul unless it's for the sake of building something better of that in the shul itself. But if he does it for another purpose, even if there's the best intentions and the greatest mitzvah externally involved in this destruction, if it doesn't contain an intrinsic benefit to the item, it's no good. So you can only destroy you can only destroy the refrigerator in order to make the refrigerator work better. But to destroy the refrigerator, to give a piece of it to the Samsung refrigerator is no good in the Isser, and from the perspective of the Isser of that a person is the Sasum Ken. No, I was just giving a mashal of this idea. By the aspect of Baltashkas, it's enough for there to be a benefit. From the aspect, however, of the special issue, not to destroy a shul, it's not enough for just to be a benefit. The benefit has to be that it itself, the shul itself, becomes enhanced and benefit. But for me to destroy, to benefit something else, as special as it may be, even for the sake of the mitzvahs also. So now the question is asked, okay, so regarding Baltashkas, I understand it was for the sake of saving the Jewish people. But regarding this special issue of not to destroy a shul, it doesn't help that it's for the sake of saving the Jewish people. It has to be, it's only mutter to be done if it's for the sake of rebuilding something better. This, then, says the Rebbe, is the special inference and novelty and message of the Yalkut Shemaini, that it used the poetic terminology of that a lion came up, the Hichivas Ariel, Amanash Yavei Aryeh, etc. Hadgish, this is coming to emphasize that the entire purpose of the destruction of the temple was not just for the sake of God soothing his anger on brick and stone and not the Jewish people. That's also correct. But there was something deeper and more mystical involved as well. And that is, it was done for the sake of rebuilding it. The destruction was done for the sake of rebuilding. In the Mela movement, And consequently, it's understood that if so, there is no prohibition of destroying a holy place, a temple, involved by God doing so, as He's doing for the purpose of rebuilding it, to build a nicer shul. This destruction is considered building, just like we ruled regarding destroying a shul for the sake of building a better one in the same spot. The destruction itself is part of the building. And this is also how we speak in language. When you see someone destroying an apartment complex in order to build a new one, you say, oh, they're building a new building. When in the midst of the destruction, when you ask, what are they doing? They're building a new complex. We don't say, oh, they're destroying the shul. They're destroying the house. Yeah, they're destroying it because it's part of the building process. What they're, in essence, really doing is that they're building. So even the actual destruction is already considered building in the high timer. And due to this reason, so this reason that the Yalkut Shemaini keeps on repeating these names, these points, as this re-emphasizes the idea that the entire destruction is called building. In other words, that if it would have said the Nebuchadnezzar came destroyed and God's going to come to rebuild it, it sounds like they're not working with each other. It sounds like they're working against each other. By using the same terms of Aryeh, Allah Aryeh, the Yahweh Aryeh, saying that this is all God. God sent a messenger called Nebuchadnezzar to destroy it for the sake of him then later coming and rebuilding it. So all Nebuchadnezzar was a contractor of destruction. But he thinks that he's there to destroy the house. He doesn't realize that the plan of the developer is then to turn this into a huge building. And that is why the destruction is called in the same name. It's the person who destroyed it is in the Medrash referred to by the same name as Hashem was going to come and rebuild it. Yahweh Aryeh and Mazal Aryeh and Aryeh. From this comes a wondrous lesson regarding the destruction of the temple. The Bayis Rishon of the first temple, the Bayis Sheni, and all the more so regarding the second. Binyan Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi Adeh Kadosh Baruch Hu. Yahweh Aryeh Zeh Kadosh Baruch Hu. V'mazar Fachtav Musaso Yud Navim. Einay Dover Sheyutcharak Lasim. From here we learn that the destruction of the first temple and the second temple is not just for the sake of in the future God coming and rebuilding the third temple, but rather also at the same time that the temple was destroyed, that is already the beginning of its building. In other words, that in essence, the building of the third temple began with the destruction of the second. And the building of the second began with the destruction of the first. Yes, okay.
Saying that Hashem made the second temple also, or at least began the building.
Correct. As we're going to soon see that there was an advantage of the second over the first. So when the first was destroyed by the Nebuchadnezzar, that was for the sake of building a second, which was even better. And that's why even at the time of destruction, that was for the sake of it. It's considered already the building process. Yasalke. Zui kol hatachla shel churban habayis. It's not just that God arranges it. That okay, we're going to build a new one at the same, we're going to build a new one at the same place that we destroyed it. The whole purpose of the destruction is for this sake. The Eibishter wanted to fix it, to build a better place. She didn't want it to remain a building of human hands. As everything built by a human hand is limited, has faults, and doesn't last forever. With one exception, that's Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu Ma'aseh of Nitzchim. But other than Moshe, everybody's objects eventually erode and go to destruction. So that's why the Eibishter wanted to come along and make room and make place for eventually Binyan de Kutzabrichu to come. Binyan Nitzchi, an eternal building. ולכן היה החורבן שבתיהם הקדוש בייס איש בייס השני למעשה תקן ולס בייס המקדש מתוקן בייס המקדש השלישי Shubinyana de Kutshabruch, in order so the Eibishter's building will come down. So in conclusion, it ends up that the destruction of the first two temples is really not a destruction, but rather a matter of building the third temple. Now the Rebbe goes on to explain how this connects with a known medrash, in which it says that, I'll read the medrash inside, that the same day of the destruction of the temple, Mashiach was born. And brings that there was an Arab and a cow, and the cow screamed, and he viewed this as messages of the temple being destroyed, and at the same very time, the temple being rebuilt. So this is now, everyone is going to connect what we just learned to understanding this cryptic medrash. Based on everything we explained, we can understand in a deeper way the story told over in the Medrash in Eicha Rabbah. Medrash in Eicha Rabbah says that at the time of the destruction, there was a certain Arab in the field, and Shama, he heard Shetzaka Parasi, his cow screaming. Tzaka Parasi Shal Yisrael. He heard a certain Jew's cow screaming, and I guess it was a awkward scream that he wasn't used to. Amar Lai, Sha'ata Necha Beis HaMikdash. She said to him that now, this is a sign that now the temple was destroyed. The take of Mamish Lachrizah, and immediately after this, he heard the cow scream again, a different scream. Amar Lai, he said to him, Noilad Mashiach Ugal Sh'Yisrael, that the Savior and Redeemer of the Jewish people has now been born. What is the meaning behind this message? Yesh Leimer, one can say, the internal message of this medrash is as follows. Not just the fact that then Mashiach was born, meaning you can say the superficial way of understanding the medrash is simply that God created the opportunity of redemption at the moment of the destruction. Since it's possible for the Jewish people to do tshuva and become immediately redeemed, so we had to already create the ability of redemption right away. So there shouldn't be any delay. So as soon as the destruction took place, already Noilad Mashiach Shel Yisrael, Mashiach was already born to be able to redeem the Jewish people. So this is the superficial way of looking at it. As I said before, that the superficial way of learning this story is that for technical reasons, God has to create the birth of Mashiach immediately with the destruction in order so if we do tshuva, we can have the immediate redemption. But there's a deeper message. Churban Abayis v'Geula binyan Beis Hamikdash eino behefsek zman, behefsek rega beinei. It taketh mamish lachurban beinam hazel lamat beretz Yisrael atzmat. Rather that at the very same moment, at the time of the destruction, at the very same time, already the beginning of the redemption began with the birth of the Savior of Yisrael, of Mashiach. The Gali Nirgash, so this falls in place what we said before, that the entire purpose of the destruction was the purpose of rebuilding. The Gali Nirgash is only Nachurban. In a revealed aspect, consciously, what was felt is that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. With the Mela, consequently, we have Hilchas Tisha B'Av, we have all the different halachas of the 3 weeks, etc. Its entire purpose is to bring to repentance of the Lashon Harama Reishel Chostanias. The Dava Zeh Medarkei HaTshuva Hu. Kedei Shagulu Binyan HaMikdash Yeva'u Dei Tshuva V'Avedis Yisrael. Okay, I'm just going to skip a little bit here. Second. Okay, the Rebbe now goes on to explain how, in truth, this is already something that we had in our history. When we were in Egypt, when we were in Mitzrayim, so the entire purpose of us being in Mitzrayim was Acha Ken Yetzu B'Chush Gad. Right? It says it was for the purpose of coming out with a great plunder. And in Kabbalah, it's explained that plunder, that Golus Mitzrayim was a tremendous chesed. It was tremendous kindness. As we know that we are here because of the big treasure. Ever since creation, and especially after Adam Rishon's sin, we're searching for the sparks, the lost sparks. The Pach Netzutzim, 288 sparks that are all over the world. And Hashem wanted it. Hashem wanted to give us a kitzer derech. He wanted to give us an easier route in accomplishing this, so it wouldn't take so long. So what did he do? He caused a big famine to happen in the whole world. So everyone had to come and dish their money. They spilled their money into the Egyptian economy, the only place that sold food. So now that all the mitzaitzis, all the sparks are in Egypt, God arranged for the Jewish people to become slaves in Egypt and eventually come out, the Rechush Gadol, and they took out and redeemed all those sparks. It says that 202 Reish Beis Nitzaitzis were redeemed in Egypt, and since then we're only working on a further 86. So if it takes so long to find 86 sparks, it was a number of years of slavery, but not 2,000, not 3,000, 4,000. So this is also the same idea that was attaching to. That in Mitzrayim itself, the entire idea of the original shibud, of the original slavery, was already part of the aliyah that they should come out for Rechush Gadol. Al derech zeh, we're in the conclusion of this Elis at the bottom of the page. Al derech zeh, me'achar shekol ha'malchus gosling Hashem Mitzrayim, and so too, since all the different exiles are similar to the exile of Egypt, this idea applies by all the different exiles. But Prat Golus HaAchon, especially this last exile, the Golu Behergish, in a conscious manner, the Geula only begins after the Chorah, which is the beginning of the gospel. The Pneumius, but internally, its entire purpose of the exile is to bring about the Rechush Gadol, to bring about the revelation of the redemption. Like it ends up that immediately with the start of the exile, this is already the beginning of the start of the redemption. This is not just from God's perspective upstairs, but also even down here, as we said, that the moment that the destruction happened, already a Jew's cow began screaming as a sign that in other words, that also the world is penetrated with this internal message that it's going towards the Geula. Now we don't see this. We don't see how the world is going towards the Geula. We see darkness, destruction, problems, and that's what the Rebbe is going to address us later on. The thing that we don't have the right eyeglasses, and you can't buy them online or in a store. It's only tzaddikim and Nesiya Yisrael who properly see and envision what's happening.
So why would it be a cow and not a dog?
There were no Nevi'im back then. It was the destruction of the temple. The Nevi'im were gone at the second temple. Ended with Chag Zechariah. But it could be that the para is the shirish of the para is the shar, the kavanah sentence. Could be some connection. Could be. But don't forget, it was the Aravi, it was the Arab who gave the interpretation. Not a Muslim. He wasn't a Muslim. This is a few years before Islam. Okay. In the last part in the end of the Sikha, the Rebbe goes into an additional concept, and we're going to spend some time on this for the rest of the shir. And that is the following. The Rebbe now uses everything we just discussed to try to clarify that we find on Haga of some Gedolei Yisrael that they would be Mechashev Kitzim, that they would tell us dates that Mashiach is going to come. And what is the perspective of Halach and Judaism on this idea of giving over the times of the redemption? Kitzur, to say the case. So I'll read a little bit here, and I'm going to go into one of our main sources is Yigeret Timan of the Rambam. We're going to read that. We're going to read parts of that inside to get a good background of the perspective. Based on everything we said above, we can explain something wondrous regarding the matter of giving over the case. Isa b'Gemara. The Gemara Maseches Sanhedrin states, Tipach atzmon shel machash v'kitzin. A very interesting wording in the Gemara here, which means that let the bones explode or become swollen, neither is a very good thing, of those who calculate the end of days. Basically, in short, it's saying that those who tell, yes, I just did the calculation, Mashiach's coming this year on the 15th of Elul, Tavshin Ayin Tes, I did all the cheshbonos, Tipach atzamon shel machash v'kitzin. The Gemara says, let their bones get swollen. The Rambam maybe is a besifroi, and the Rambam paskins this in his sefer. We're going to read it next week, coming up. See him Rambam, finishing Gimel Prakim verse. The Rambam paskins this in a sefer, and Hilchos Malachim Perek Yud Beis. And therefore, a person should never sit and try to calculate when the Geula is going to come. As Amru Chachamim, as the sages said, in the Sanhedrin, we just mentioned, so this is the official position of the Talmud and of Halacha, that a person should not be involved at all and try to figure out the date of when Mashiach is. Now, why? Why do you think this is the case? Why? Maybe we should. But that's the only reason. Better things to do. It's going to enhance our anticipation for Mashiach. It shows you're serious business. I mean, what do you mean? If I really believe in Mashiach's coming, I want to know, should I invest in buying, getting a mortgage, going through this whole headache? If I can just do the cheshbon, I know Mashiach's coming in a few weeks. Why do I need to go through the headache of the mortgage and everything else? Well, that's why I want to do the cheshbon. I want to know. What's wrong with doing a cheshbon?
Because Hashem can always make it come quicker than the
Okay, so let's say I when I reveal this case, I tell everybody, guys, this is, I put a little star on the bottom. Guys, this is this is the assumed date, but it's always possible to have to do the tshuva and achishen and things will come earlier. But this is the assumed date. And the pile, this is what we've seen. We've seen many different kitzim that have been brought down. The question is, how does this not contradict the Maimer Chazal and the ruling of the Rambam? So the general reason of why it's discouraged, and we're going to read this in the Yigeret Timan right now, is for a few reasons. Number one, what happens when people tell people Mashiach is coming by this and this date, and the date comes and there's no Mashiach? So if somebody comes along and says, so I see there's no Mashiach, and he stops believing in Mashiach's coming because of that, that's something very dangerous. One of the Ikari Emunah is to believe in the Goyal Tzedek, to believe in the Redeemer. So when a person gets false prospects and he builds to it to the point that he'll say there's no longer a Redeemer, as there is an opinion in the Gemara who says, right? Hillel Zakin said that Ein Mashiach v'Yisrael v'achlu b'mei Chizki. We don't rule that way. There's an opinion in the Gemara, Sanhedrin, who states that Chizkiah was Mashiach and he never made it. He never reached the end of the line, and therefore Mashiach, there's no more Mashiach. Hashem is going to come and redeem us. No, he believes in redemption. Yeah. He believes in redemption, but just, it won't be a physical one general. God is going to come himself. That's clear. A person's not allowed to believe in that. But I'm just saying, we see even in the Gemara, when Chizkiah was with his Mashiach, that his time came and went. So one of the Tanoim stopped believing in the concept of a Mashiach and rather just said God himself will take it. So that is one worry. one worry is that it's telling people Kitzim are going to get them all geared up, and then the day's going to come. What's going to be? So the question is, so why then do we see that G'day Yisrael did get themselves involved in revealing the case? So let's first go to Yigeres Teiman of the Rambam to get a little background here. A little background of Yigeres Teiman. Yigeres Teiman is one of the famous letters written by the Rambam to the Jewish community of Yemen. The Yemen Jewish community, of course, accepted the Rambam as his personal Morid Asra, as the Rav of Teiman. They had their own G'day Yisrael, but they accepted the Rambam as their Gadol Adar, and corresponded with him for leadership direction. And this specific letter is dealing with a few political issues that was going on in Yemen at the time. One of them being a Shabtai Tzvi kind of episode, where a Yemenite man claimed to be the Messiah. He was going to redeem the Jewish people. And he started calculating all these different kitzim and when Mashiach's going to come. He wasn't very wealthy, he wasn't very smart, and he wasn't very learned, but he had a big mouth. People started believing him. Sounds like politics, huh? And people started believing him. And so he was getting a following, and people in Teiman go to the Rambam, what he has to say. So the Rambam goes through a lot of different posts, a few chapters in the Sigeres. We're just going to deal with the section where he mentions this idea that he already completely negated in his Mishnah Torah of trying to note a date of Mashiach's time. So he writes like this. That which you wrote to me in your letter, the Yemenites, that Rav Sadia Goin himself had noted a few dates of when Mashiach would come. It's not there. It's not in the Sefer. So first of all, number one, the reason why it's forbidden for a person to calculate kitzim is because this is definitively hidden from people. There's no such thing as someone figuring it out. It's impossible to figure out. So it's a useless task. It's a useless endeavor because you will never, God hides it from you. It's like someone looking, saying, I know Moshe is buried somewhere, so let me look for Moshe's burial. God doesn't allow people to find out where he's buried. As the Gemara in Saita brings the whole story, when they try to find him, so to the people on top of the mountain, they saw Moshe on bottom, the people on bottom saw Moshe on top, they can never get to Moshe. So the case is hidden. There's no way to figure it out. Daniel, as Daniel says in chapter 12, that this matter is completely closed. Okay, then we begin saying that there were chachamim such as Rav Sadia Goin, that they began doing certain calculations of possibilities, hash'aris. For example, we know, and also when you give a certain case, we don't know, even when they would give a case, they didn't know exactly how it would come about. He gives an example, as we know, that when we were in Egypt, we had a case, 400 years, right? We knew that, it was a tradition. But no one knew how to calculate it. Even now, it's so confusing how to calculate it. To figure out Rashi, all the different calculations. Even now, after the fact, it's confusing how to calculate how the 400 years of Galus is calculated and adds up. So the Rambam says that if by Mitzrayim we had a tradition and it's written in scripture of a case of 400 years, it was Sasum, it was in essence non-disclosed. No one really knew when the due date would be, when that 400 years would end up. So certainly regarding the final Geula, we don't have any date revealed to us, that this matter is closed. Now, he says the following. Anu doninus of Sadia Lakapstos. Of Sadia going, we will judge him favorably, the fact that he calculated kitzim. The Naimra, we will say, Shemash Vilin and Zev, Afti Shayadesh Torah. Maybe the reason why he did this, even though he knew the Torah forbids this, as the people in his generation had very bad philosophies. They were people with They had corrupt philosophies. And he felt that the Torah of Hashem would be lost if not for him to start revealing a few aspects of the Torah that were concealed until then. And therefore he didn't write a specific date, he never wrote a date, but he wrote some cryptic messages, which till today is debated how to properly understand Rav Saadia Gaon, but nonetheless he was dealing with calculating the dates. So the Rambam here writes in defense of Rav Saadia Gaon that we can be Melamed Chus of Rav Saadia Gaon and say that he did this in order to strengthen the Jewish people and their emunah and their bitachon, as he saw in that time that they needed this therapy, they needed this medicine in order to get them back on track with Shem Shamayim. Therefore, we shouldn't have any claims against Rav Saadia. Then the Rambam, in the end of this chapter, does something very strange. He just spent a whole paragraph negating and putting down the Chashiv Kitzin and defending Rav Saadia for his specific example, but in general saying that the person is not allowed to do so. And then he himself throws out a huge case at the end. The Rambam writes the following case that he received. It says the following. The real time of Mashiach's coming of the Geula is not known to anybody. But we have, in our family, says the Rambam, in the Maimonides family, a great tradition, a wondrous tradition that I received from my father, Maimon, who received from his father, all the way back until the beginning of the exile in Jerusalem. Meaning that this tradition dates back to the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So then they already had a tradition of when the Kates would end, when the Kates would be. The Bir Hadavar. The explanation is as follows: in the prophecy of Bilam is hinted. This is the tradition that the Rambam received. In the prophecy of Bilam, it's hinted to the time that prophecy will return to the Jewish people after it ceases. As we know, right, the prophecy ceased in the beginning of the Second Temple era, and it says that it will be returned. Now, when will prophecy and Nevuah be returned to the Jewish people? So the exact date is hinted to in the Parsha of Bilam's Nevuah. How? Although all the psukim in the Torah have a pshat, a superficial meaning and intent, nonetheless, they also have different mystical hints that they are hinting to. And he gives a few examples, and then he says, "Al inyan hazeh," and regarding this matter, kibalnu, we received. Says Zesha Bilam, that which Bilam stated in his prophecy, right? The pasuk says, "At this time, to Jacob and to Israel, you will say, what does God do?" Yesh Beisoid is a hidden message. Shemana Esahi, that from that exact time that Bilam said this, Yesh Lachashiv, one should calculate Kaminyan Sheyesh Masheshes Mebereshis. A person should calculate from the time that Bilam said that in history, from the beginning of creation. How many years passed? How many years? I don't know. What's the calculation? The Torah was given in 2440 years. And according to most approaches, this took place 40 years, at the end of the 40 years. So there it ends up being 2488. So 2,488 years into creation. This is what Bilam says. So calculate that amount of years. From Bilam's time, and that's when the Bilam will return to place. So what year is that? 2488 plus 2488. It ends up being, I believe, the year 1230. Which was, after the Common Era. Meaning, this was in the year 4,000 and something. Do the calculation. But the point is, this was in the Rambam's time. Yes, this was slightly after the Rambam's time. So you have to understand. So, and who was around back then? How did we see this? So this is the Rambam here. He's saying, guys, it's terrible. Don't do Gilui Kitzin. And I know you're using Sadia Gain as an example, but he had a special reason why he did it. It's terrible. Nobody knows. And by the way, I want to tell you the secret, okay, about this case that I know about that's guarded in my family. And he publicizes, and then he says the following, that he then concludes, and certain, now even though this revelation is only regarding the Nevuah, certainly ain't Safik Hazaras HaNevuah Ikakam Mashiach, that the return of prophecy is an introduction for Mashiach's coming. And then he continues and says, this case that I am revealing to you is absolutely true, and we were very harshly warned not to tell it to anybody. But nonetheless, I'm telling it to you. So what happened at that time? So what actually happened at that time, that was 1200s, was the time of where we had the period of called Chassidei Ashkenaz. Chassidei Ashkenaz were Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, Eliezer Midramaisa, who was famous Balarikeach. And these weren't just great Torah scholars. These people were miracle workers of Baal Shem Tov level. There are a lot of stories. Unfortunately, the folklore, the stories aren't as popular today. But that was the Baal Shem Tov stories of back then. In the 1300s, when you had to tell your kids a story at night, you said Baal Shem Tov stories of Yehuda Chassid and Eliezer Midramaisa. Crazy Baal Shem Tov stories. Type stories, right? Of using Shemas Hashem, traveling in the air on a mat. Really unbelievable mices that are recorded in this time. And Nevuos. And so the Rebbe points out in another sikha that it was specifically in that era, in that area in Germany, by those Chassidei Ashkenaz, that the Nevuah began to return. Concept of Nevuah began to return. And this is how the kates that the Rambam spoke of in the tradition began to sparkle out. In other words, that we don't find this the ability of these nature-breaking miracles spoken of prior to that time. Even the Rambam's time. Look at the Rambam. The Rambam was very philosophical, natural, scientific. It was, the Rambam wasn't involved in all this, since these things weren't around. At the times of the Geonim, even, miracles weren't really seen. Nevuah wasn't seen. It was, everything was seichos. Was the time of the medieval times. This was a time of enlightenment, Jewish enlightenment, and Haskalah and philosophy in Spain and other areas. And when did it begin to sprinkle again this Gilui Lakus, this revelation of godliness and miraculous break of nature? This was around those years. This is when Yehuda Chassid started working, those years. So now that we have this information, let's go back to the Sikha. So let's start. We're going to start from the words, the end of the page. I will apply. Despite the fact that the Rambam, the Gemara all speak out against it, in actuality we find many different kitzim that are recorded. In all the generations, we find different kitzim that the sages of those times said. There's a list of them in the Sefer Shutmin Hashemayim. There's a list of all the different kitzim until that time that were spoken of. The Rambam himself, who's the big Baal Musar against calculating kitzim, then tells everybody very strangely, by the way, this is this kitz that I received, and I'm not going to tell anybody, but I'm telling you. And so too in the future generations, we know that there were B'nai Yisrael who said over, who calculated kitzim. Do a kitz shalad ma'azak me'yadua, the Alter Rebbe said a kitz. In the Maimer of his Elef Shva Meyes, the Alter Rebbe there in that Maimer revealed a certain case, and they say that case was referring to in the 1830s when the Likutei Torah was published. But he pointed out a case. The Pashto, so how do we explain this? You can simply say that the Gemara and the Halach and Rambam are referring to something totally different. There's no issue, you can say, with calculating the dates in order to build anticipation and to have approximations. It's like weather. When the weather reporter says it's going to rain, it doesn't rain. So you say, well, it's never going to rain again. They got it wrong. But you get anticipated. You start.
The weatherman isn't the gadol.
Correct. And the Gadol also is not saying that it's for certain this is when it will happen. He's giving an expectation, a hash'ara. So since they're saying that this isn't the final date, that this isn't the final thing, and if this comes and Mashiach doesn't come, he's not going to come anymore. So it doesn't transgress the Gemara statement. The intent of the Gemara statement is specifically with those people who give a date and then say, that's it, if this date comes and it doesn't happen, it's finished. I mean, we're reading this as history, but unfortunately there's a lot of crazy cults in the world that do these things. A lot of crazy cults. There was a famous cult from California, I forgot the name, that they went to the island in where was it? In South America? Jonestown. Where was Jonestown? It was in South America. It wasn't Brazil, but it was in South America. That they said, and this was one example, there's many of these crazy cults. That they say, the Messiah is going to come by this and this date. And when the date came, of course, the Messiah didn't come. They said, well, he didn't come to us, we have to go to them. And they killed, everybody died. They killed everybody. The whole cult.
Yes.
Drinking Kool-Aid?
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Oh, don't drink the Kool-Aid? Right, so the point's in the Kool-Aid. But the point is that they believed that that's it. Once the date comes and Mashiach hasn't come, it's over. So this is the people like that, we say to them, Tipach atzaman shemachash v'kitz. However, if a person is just giving an estimation and he's not telling anybody to drink Kool-Aid, so there's no problem. The whole fear of the Gemara is if it will bring a lack of anticipation Mashiach's coming. So if it will burst people's bubble, if it will make them feel to give up hope, chas v'shalom. And therefore the sages said that we dislike those who calculate the kitzim. However, the Bnei Yisrael, their purpose of revealing the kitzim was on the contrary. L'shem tachas achinalos, for the greatest purpose, as the Rambam himself says regarding the Rasach. So machshav b'zman hamen yisod b'shafel hamatziv, being that at those time periods the Jewish people were at a very low state. And there were people of all different types of philosophies and thoughts. Therefore, the Bnei Yisrael gathered the Jewish people as to give them hasharas, to give them anticipated dates for Mashiach to come. And by doing so, he strengthened their emunah. And he strengthened their desire and anticipation for the redemption. In other words, it's not so simple when you think about it, because what is exactly the psychology here? What is exactly the purpose here that we're mentioning the kitzim? We're saying that when you mention the kitzim for the sake of giving a final date, and if it passes, that's it, no more Mashiach, then no good. When you mention it for the sake of building anticipation, that's okay. But if the date passes, even if to begin with you said, guys, I'm just like a weather reporter, I actually have no idea it's going to rain. I'm just assuming it's going to rain. No. But so said we have a certain calculation that this looks like is a good time for Mashiach to come. And it happens and Mashiach doesn't come. So people, we gain the anticipation beforehand, but what's going to be after that day? People are going to feel we missed it. People are going to feel a little bit deflated from anticipation. So how does this not contradict the Gemara? So I guess, this the Rebbe doesn't address here in the Sikha, but I guess what we can answer is that it's worth it and necessary to have even a temporary anticipation and excitement for Mashiach's coming, even with the risk that we're taking, that we may be disappointed afterwards and have a little, so to say, low time of anticipation, than to be immune and to be completely disengaged from anticipation at all.
So that must have been the Rebbe's calculation.
The Rebbe is here saying that's a calculation of all the Gedolei Yisrael. The calculation of all the Gedolei Yisrael were they didn't make it up. They really saw that this is a Zman Masugah, that this is a time for Mashiach to come. And therefore, they wanted to bring the nation in anticipation for it and excite them for it. And by doing so, that helps to make that day more become actualized. Based on the above, we can say possibly, we can offer the possible explanation. Since the tzaddikim see all the time throughout the exile how every single day in exile is part of the bringing of the redemption, and how that is adding another nail to the revelation of the redemption. And every single day they see the additional revelations and elevations of the Rechush Gadol that we spoke in Mitzrayim. Therefore, they decided to reveal different end periods of where they see that this is an auspicious time for Mashiach to come. In other words, that they are seeing, they're not just seeing, well, everyone's so down, let's make something exciting. Let's make something about exciting. They're seeing the Pnimius Hanel, how every single day there's a greater added revelation towards the redemption. And therefore they see that this is a time that this is Masugah for Mashiach to come. And therefore the Gedolei Yisrael would tell and reveal to people the different kitzim, in order so the Jewish people would add in their own avodah and bring the Gula through their own avodah. It's plain. The noted times that were mentioned by the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, the purpose is so people add more in Torah mitzvahs. And so they be fit for the time of Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, and that gives them the potential to do so. And therefore, in addition to the fact that certainly the prohibition of calculating kitzim does not apply in this case, furthermore, the great tzaddikim who themselves see all the tremendous treasures that the Jewish people have collected throughout their period in the stay of the Golus. So maybe when they see all this, they begin praising all the more so the Jewish people and the love of the Jewish people and the merit of the Jewish people, and how that they are ready and they are building for the time of the redemption. Therefore, they have to reveal it in order to have an additional arousal of Vedas Hashem and Asinas Koyach. This is the end of this selection. The actual sikh in Chelik Chav Tes has a little more of a continuation relating to Parshas Dvarim. It's not relevant for us now. So to summarize the ideas that we learned in this sikh, we began with the discussion of how every stage in our life, even those of our own fault, even those stages which are downers due to our own fault, our own doing, is all part of a divine plan of the ladder of the 42 travels. Just like in this week's parsha, we went through the 42 travels, and some of them were not very good due to our own sins. Nonetheless, is all part of a divine plan of elevation. So too in every Jew's personal life. And furthermore, even regarding the destruction of the temple, which was, so to say, due to a loss of privilege of having it, in truth, it was done for the sake of benefiting that the Jewish people wouldn't be destroyed. That Hashem soothed his anger on brick and stone. But furthermore, that was really done in order to make room for a much bigger development of the third temple, or the second temple, the times of the first temple. And therefore, even at the original time of the destruction, it's already considered the time of the rebuilding of the temple. And to the same point that Nebuchadnezzar is considered a shliach of Hashem. He was a contracted worker by God to help destroy the current building so he can then build the future building. And based on this, we can understand, and then the Rebbe went on to explain based on that Tzaddikim and Nasi Yisrael, they have this vision and how they see that throughout the entire period of exile, all the downwards are really adding into the revelation that we will receive in the future. And due to this, therefore, they felt necessary at times to reveal the different kitzim as they see all of the added geluyim added together, and how the Jewish people are meritorious and ready for the redemption to come.
Here's a question. This Rosh Hashanah is for Torah, speaks about the Torah. Therefore, we will find it in as well. What was Amun's why did he get this to that